Hey, what's up, everybody? Justin here to review a classic from my preteen years, Dragon Ball Z, Idainaru Dragon Ball Densetsu, or simply Dragon Ball Z Legends to some English-speaking fans. So before I get into the game, I kind of want to get into my personal history with Dragon Ball Z and how I got this game. Of course, it's not the original copy I got when I was a kid. So I first got into DBZ when I was in 5th grade during a family trip to the Philippines for the 1994-1995 winter holiday season to visit my relatives on my mother's side there. And that's where I was first exposed to Dragon Ball Z, as I said before. Or more specifically, Buyu Retsuden for the Sega Mega Drive. While everyone was kind of fighting over which game was better, Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat back in the US, Buyu Retsuden, which my cousins owned, provided something fresh for my brothers and I. And while it was kind of like a baptism by fire into the journey to anime, before that, I had a subconscious idea and concept of what Japanese animation was. But this was like my first exposure to it, close to the original source. The hairdos were wacky, but I thought they were really cool. And I loved how you could fly in that game, and whenever you're apart, like one person's on the ground and one person's in the air, like one person can throw a fireball from the air, and then the person on the ground can reverse it, and you kind of have to do a certain struggle by button mashing to see who can come out on top. And I thought that was really cool and unique. And keep in mind, of course, Dragon Ball Z, it wasn't a thing in North America yet. And the first 13 episodes of the original Dragon Ball series wouldn't premiere until the following fall. But when I left the Philippines, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and then anime as a whole, just really stuck with me. And after that, I wanted to learn more and see more anime, but that's a different story for a different time. Maybe I should have noticed sooner, but I remember in the back of EGM magazines back in those days, they had ads for Japanese games and Dragon Ball Z figures. I felt like I was alone to some degree. However, some of the games like Ultimate Battle 22 for the Super Famicom was expensive for my parents to bother buying for my brothers and I. And I remember towards the end of 6th grade, give or take, I was going to get a PlayStation, and I saw ads for a PlayStation game called Dragon Ball Z Legends. Unfortunately, me being a 6th grader, I had no means of getting my PlayStation modded at the time to play Japanese games. But all I could do was dream until then. And then around a year later, in 7th grade, a video game store that also specialized in imports opened, and they were selling copies of Dragon Ball Z Legends for PS1 and the Sega Saturn. And I would not get the game until Christmas of '97 rolled around. And we got a Saturn that May, and my brothers and I got our first 2 Japanese games on that Christmas for the Saturn, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and this right here, Dragon Ball Z Legends. This is the Saturn collection. The one I first got back in Christmas of '97 was the regular cover one, where this is kind of more covering the entire front cover. So, let's get into Dragon Ball Z Legends. If you're looking for a conventional fighting game, Dragon Ball Z Legends is far from it. For its time, it was a true to the source material experience. As opposed to your typical fighting game where you just throw fireballs and your typical punches and kicks until one has their life bar depletes, Dragon Ball Z Legends has you fighting over a power balance meter. Player 1 is blue, while player 2 is red. If one can fill up their meter first with their corresponding color, then they can use an attack and the losing opponent will lose a chunk of their life bar. Some characters will have one attack like Kid Gohan with the Masenko. Regular Goku will have 2 attacks like his Genki Dama and his Kamehameha. and Frieza will have 3 distinguishing attacks. However, how fast you can fill up your meter can depend on which character you use and who you're fighting. Some characters can fill up their meters faster than others. Of course, this depends on the difference in power levels. For example, you have regular Goku versus Kid Buu. If Kid Buu, with his strikes and his speed, he can fill up his meter really, really fast, while with Goku in his regular form will be much weaker, and it will be more demanding for him to fill up his meter, so it'll take a lot more hits and a lot more time. Controls themselves are pretty simple. You just approach your opponent by pressing up, or you can retreat by pushing down. You don't have to move and jump around just to string together some combos. You approach your opponent, and then you just push the attack button, which is B on the Sega Saturn version, and the more strikes you land, the more your meter fills up. However, the more you attack, the more your ki bar will deplete, so you have to be careful, and you will have to periodically fill up your ki. And if you want to make your fighter stronger and faster, by let's say pressing up and X on the Sega Saturn, you can have them surrounded by a ki aura, but this will of course deplete your ki faster. Usually this will be represented by a yellow force field, but with regular Goku, his will be red to represent his Kaioken attack. The force field will also make you impervious to regular ki blasts, which is also nice. And of course you could do generic ki blasts by pushing C, but they don't do as much damage as, let's say, knocking your opponents by stringing together hammering attacks. If someone is about to, let's say, swing a strike at you at full force, you can also disappear before it lands, and then appear right behind them and land a strike of your own, just like in the original anime. When knocking someone down and or away, or while doing, let's say, a special attack, you can do some damage to the surrounding environments, such as knocking down trees or small mountains. While this is normal for some DBZ games post-PS2 era, but for the 32-bit era, it was a pretty big deal. The format of this game isn't limited to just, say, one-on-one fighting. You can do 2 against 1, 1 against 3, 2 against 2, or 2 against 3, or 3 against 3. And for the story mode, the screen will focus between your character and the opponent, but while doing a versus mode, if you're doing, let's say, 3 against 3, the screen will be limited to those characters, so it will be overwhelming. There are 3 distinct modes. You have the Z campaign, which is the story mode, the versus mode, and a special novelty of other battles like Trunks versus the androids. What's fun about the story mode is that before every battle, there will be an opening narration provided by Joji Yanami, who has always been the narrator, and he was also the voice of Kaio-sama to provide context before the coming battle.
Saiyajinの戦士が地球に降り立った。ベジータとナッパ。その圧倒的な戦闘力の前に次々と力尽きていく Z 戦士たち。果たして悟空は間に合うのか。そしてあの世での修行の成果は通用するのか。ここに地球の運命をかけた天下分け目の超決戦が始まる。異星人戦士来襲、戦闘民族サイヤ人対 Z 戦士。
The game also has the original voice cast, and when selecting a character within battle, characters not participating will provide commentary.
すごい！宇宙船の中でどんな修行してたんだろう。
The music is pretty nice and ethereal, something you don't get from the anime, so it's something fresh but also fits the atmosphere of a game. When you finish a level, you'll be ranked by how faithful you were able to adapt the original story on a scale from, let's say, 1 to 100. So, for example, in the Frieza fight, if you, let's say, have Vegeta and Krillin die, it will determine your ranking. And of course, if you let Frieza kill Krillin, it will allow Goku to become Super Saiyan in the game. And in the level against the androids, Android 16 won't participate unless Goku does, so I thought that was a really nice touch.
あとはオラに任せて。
私の戦う時が来たよ。
みんなすまねえ。
Of course, the real downside to this is with the technology of the time. So let's say Goku, Super Saiyan Goku, and Super Saiyan 3 Goku will be separate characters in the Versus section. It wouldn't be until the Budokai games that you could transform, within the fight. But this is something you got to work with if you're not used to the DBZ games from the 32-bit era and down. The story mode allows you to familiarize yourself with how the game plays out, and it's relatively easy to master. The real challenge is if you have friends or siblings who can equal your skill in the Versus mode. I remember I used to let my friends borrow it so they can get good at it, and whenever we had sleepovers, we got to a skill level where it would take maybe an hour to struggle just to get that power bar in our favor. Usually, we would do one-on-one fights, and I remember my brother and a friend of ours had this one fight where they were doing the after-image counterattack and couldn't land a hit for, let's say, 20 consecutive times because they kept on doing that after-image attack, which I thought was nuts. And at times, some of our fights were intense and as lengthy as the fights in the anime, so it could become a battle of attrition, which is something you don't get in a traditional fighting game in comparison to this. While I have copies of the PS1 version, which are easy to get at a 110 yen bargain bin at a book off in Japan, I have yet to get around to playing it. Players who are familiar with both versions have told me that the Sega Saturn version is the superior one, but I understand the PS1 version does have some different special attacks and graphics with them as well. But I've been told the Saturn version runs better and plays better, and I do take these people's word for it, but then again, most of these people tend to favor the Sega Saturn more. In that case, Sega Saturn Shiro! As for the Japanese comprehension, it's not necessary whatsoever. I first started playing this game about a year and a half before I started formally studying Japanese, and I got by fine without it. And if you know the story of Dragon Ball Z, then you pretty much got the general idea of how the game goes overall. To conclude, I say for newer and maybe younger players, it would be hard to get into this because this isn't your typical fighting game. But if you want something atypical but true to DBZ in its own way, I would strongly recommend Legends. But this is a game that is also best enjoyed, multiplayer, and with someone that can give you a challenge. As I said before, the PS1 versions are cheap, and I tend to find them for 110 yen, as I said before, while the Saturn versions can range between 1500 yen to 2500 yen, depending on where you can find them and their conditions. And lastly, I'd like to give a shout out to the Discords that actively participate in, such as Sega Saturn Shiro, Sega Bits, Retro Crush, Retro Blast, Bob Samurai Chat Group, Tikio Sanfam, and Learn Japanese Pod, and one Discord group that I do translation work for. You know who you are. Anyway, for the DBZ fans, check this out.